It's my very special pleasure today to introduce to you Professor Fred von Saal. Fred is a Curatus Professor, the highest rank at the University of Missouri at Columbia. Fred is really an epic scientist, in my opinion, in modern American science. He began looking at low-dose, he's an endocrinologist, he began looking at low-dose adverse effects of a very common chemical, bisphenol A, well over 15 years ago now, I guess, and published results that were highly problematic for the ongoing use of this compound, of which we make about 6 billion pounds in the US alone, and of which we put into an extraordinary array of products. The progress of Fred's scientific academic life from those initial publications is quite an extraordinary story. And it goes all the way to really straightening out, or setting the vectors up to really straighten out the way science is done at the FDA and at the national level. Fred is an iconic figure in endocrine disruption. The things that he has done to make the country, make corporate America look at very serious issues associated with the low-dose adverse effects of everyday chemicals is completely extraordinary, and I'm truly delighted that he could be here and share his insight and incredible science and knowledge with us today. Please welcome Professor Fred von Saal.
I would like to thank Jerry Collins for the invitation, and I've had a wonderful day here looking around this really just spectacular university and very impressive facilities. And so what I want to do today is to give you an idea of the mess that our system has evolved into with regard to assessing the risk posed to everyone in this room by chemicals that are presented to the public as completely safe. And the reason that the system is a mess is that there's a huge amount of science generated, and practically all of it is ignored by federal regulatory agencies. And with the Obama administration's people brought into the federal regulatory agencies, we are experiencing for the first time a shift in attitude. And it isn't just a shift in attitude from the Bush administration. We had just as vigorous arguments with the people in the Clinton administration as we did with the Bush administration. So it's really been very bipartisan in terms of being anti-science. So what I'm going to do is talk about a molecule that about 20 years ago I had never heard of. I'm an endocrinologist, I am not a toxicologist. And but this is a sex hormone. This acts like a sex hormone, estradiol, a hormone that everybody has active in his or her body, men and women. And so it really falls under the domain not of toxicology, but of endocrinology. And I started studying this as an endocrinology and infuriated the toxicologists by doing this. And I thought I'd tell you about this story, which has been kind of a strange one. And so bisphenol A is used to make plastic. And as we know, plastic is fantastic. And we live in a plastic planet, and it's pretty much revealed by this picture. It pretty much says it all. We are being absolutely inundated. About every 2 to 2.5 years, 1 trillion pounds of plastic are made. Most of them are thrown away in the landfill. The rate of recycling is relatively low. In addition, they beautify our rivers. And this is the Los Angeles River flowing out into the Pacific Ocean, where one of the best characterized cyclonic events that occurs in all oceans, where you have this flow of water that actually concentrates debris in the middle of what is termed the Pacific garbage patch. But this occurs in the South Pacific, the North Pacific, the Indian Ocean, all over the world. You have these events occurring where you have this massive contamination of debris accumulating that is going to be an ecological nightmare for the future. And one other thing, you'll notice this is Hawaii, and the flow is down here. So here's a typical Hawaiian beach, which many people in geology believe, when it comes to looking at our era, what is going to characterize our era is massive concentrations of plastic everywhere, because there's just so much of it made. Now, there is a huge price being paid by aquatic wildlife, migratory birds that are surfing along the water and eating up all of this plastic. Now, people always ask me, how do I know one plastic from another? And the plastic industry was phenomenally clever, and nobody ever licensed the recycling code. Practically all these plastics are non-recyclable. In the city I live in, they'll recycle the ethylene-based plastic, polyethylene terephthalate, and high-density polyethylene 1 and 2. The rest of them they won't take. You don't want to recycle polyvinyl chloride. It generates dioxin. Polystyrene and polycarbonate is not a recyclable plastic. And so the idea that they're putting recycling codes on them is pretty amusing to begin with, because they're not recyclable. And all they do is basically tell you the base polymer. And the reality is that there is no such thing as a pure plastic. All of these plastics, like we know there are phthalates, which block testosterone production, that are also required to make polyvinyl chloride. They're released from the water bottles that you get. There you go. You want to get a hit of phthalates? Take a drink. Also, you get trace metals out of them. The older, warmer they get, the more they release. These are all petroleum products, and they practically all have brominated flame retardants or phosphated flame retardants. And then there's tetrabromo bisphenol A, which is the highest volume flame retardant. These are all neurotoxic. So if there's a safe chemical, I don't know about it. But number 7 essentially means none of the above. Over 90% of it, 95%, is bisphenol A, this extremely high volume chemical that I'm going to talk about that I stumbled onto by accident. It's estimated that last year about 8 billion pounds were made. The amount going up 10% a year. It's one of the highest volume chemicals in production. It's used in so many different products. It lines cans. It's used as dental sealant and dental filling, to make all kinds of plastic products, plastic wrap. My research assistant took some receipt paper, held it in her hand, and then wiped her hand off and had thousands of micrograms of bisphenol A on that she had on her fingers. If she had touched food with that, she would have been massively exposed to it. The receipt paper is coated with free bisphenol A. It's not in polymer form. It's like talcum powder being on it. Put your hands on it, it's just on your hands. You stick your hands in your mouth, or you touch food, you touch your clothes. It is clearly a major source of contamination of humans.